Can you hear me, Judge?
Hey, I got you, brother.
All right.
I'm going to mute and make a phone call. Just wanted to make sure I was good. My meeting went fine yesterday.
Good. Glad to hear that.
How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
You're fancy with your backgrounds and your cover picture thumbnail.
I've been practicing. I've been practicing a lot. You had to go through a lot of the settings and figure out how to do all that. It's a real pretty crane you got there right over your head, the courthouse.
Andrew?
Yeah.
They moved that cupola down where we're going to store it, and then they're working on the roof today. But the main thing I hope that happens out of this is that our friend Steve Price stops obsessing on he thinks he can fix it, and has sent tons of letters to all our magistrates saying so.
So I was under the impression that they were going to take it away and fix it, or are they just building a new one?
No, they're building a replica that's got an aluminum frame, and it'll Campbellsville Industries down in Campbellsville, Kentucky, are doing it, and that's their specialty, and it'll look identical to what was just moved. And what we're going to try to do with what we moved is kind of do just a little bit of repair where we had rust, and then try to maybe mount it on 4 posts out in the park somewhere.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So anyway, I'm going to make his phone call. I'll be right back.
All right.
Andrew, just checking to make sure you can hear me and see me fine.
I can hear you and see you, Dr. Hub. Thanks.
All right, man. Thank you. Yeah, when I actually, my impression was any official meeting of a board requires video.
Yes.
And that's what I thought. So
they've relaxed their restrictions a little bit, but the new restrictions are use video if you've got it. Otherwise, you can use audio.
Right. Okay.
Are you still seeing my screen? My screen share with the
downtown? Yeah.
Huh. That's not what you're supposed to see. Let's see.
Right. So what I see is I see on top my video. I see Joe's black screen with his name, and then for you, I see your picture, meaning of the downtown at City Hall.
Well, I think that's the problem right there.
Now I see you.
You should see.
Now I got you.
You should see this. Let's see, waiting room.
Okay.
I messed that up. Scott, Jessica. Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Can hear you and see you. Jessica, can you hear me? Jessica's not there yet. Jessica, can you hear us?
Jessica, are you muted?
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we're just waiting on the mayor to join us. I'm gonna check my text messages here.
Andrew, is it appropriate to ask on item agenda number 4, the identity of the requester?
Typically not, but
Does it matter that this was a plan approved by the commission previously? Andrew?
I'm not sure. Let me pull up my agenda here. All right, I think we've got.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning. This is my version of busting in the door 2 minutes late as I normally do. So I just wanted you guys to have some normalcy to your life.
Good morning, Dr. Hub.
Morning, guys.
All right, let's
Morning,
see.
everybody.
Should be able to, everybody should see everybody now. Let me pull up my agenda real quick.
Andrew, I had pulled that up on the phone this morning, and why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order? I assume y'all didn't do that when I was late to the meeting.
We have not. You take over.
Okay. And Jessica, if you could note for the minutes that it looks like we have all 3 commissioners online and no proxies are necessary. If I could start by saying, Scott and Jessica, thank you from the commissioners for keeping this ship afloat and keeping what revenues there are available, you all being able to keep those dollars rolling into us. So first off, I want to say thank you very much for your ability to do that.
You're very welcome, sir.
And secondly, I responded to your email last week, Scott. I thought the commissioner's update was very helpful. It cuts down on the amount of time we have to spend in a Zoom conference. Dr. Hub's given it a thumbs up as well. So those things are helpful as we manage our way through these times and using different technology. So with that said, we each got a copy of the minutes from our last regularly scheduled meeting, I believe.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Motion's made, Dr. Hub.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Judge. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. So Scott, as I recall, we had a very abbreviated agenda today, but there's probably a fair amount of information that you need to give us.
Well, on the item number 4, the taxpayer penalty and interest waiver, I'm going to let Jessica take the lead on that because she's got the specifics of that taxpayer's current payment plan.
Well, and Judge, regarding your question, you asked, can we identify the taxpayer? The commission is certainly entitled to all the information that it needs in order to process that request for penalty and interest waiver. The public would not be entitled to that information.
Sure. So to be clear, this was a previously approved plan.
Correct. It was one of the accounts that we were working to try to make current that had a pretty significant withholding balance. And because of the amount, it was brought to the commission for previous approval for what their monthly plan could look like.
Right.
Scott, Jessica, question for you.
Mhm.
I think it does make it easier for the commissioners to have the full picture, particularly with a taxpayer that has some history with us. So while we can't discuss it with the public, I think the commissioners do need to know the name of the business, unless you all have a really good explanation for why we shouldn't.
And,
Yeah, no, I think you all need to know. And I think what we could do is, if you all wanted to,
I can make it more anonymous in the just say taxpayer in the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some way, I think the 3 commissioners deserve to have the full picture, unless we get close to tripping over something that you all know as professionals we should not trip over.
yeah, we can't reveal to the public any information that reveals the affairs of the taxpayer's business. I think we could say to the public which business has requested a penalty and interest waiver, but when we start getting into the details about how much, then we've let that cat out of the bag. I think the thing that we could do is we could go into closed session to talk about it, but I don't know that we have. I guess our only justification for doing that is to discuss confidential information.
Yeah, it's a special call meeting, right? I'm not sure we can add closed session to the thing. It seems to me that we've been talking only about 2 big issues, and it seems to me this one is probably the smaller of the 2, right?
That's correct.
There we go.
Another option is that, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dr. Hub. Another option is that we could simply email you right now any information that you need, and then you can have it, and then it's private information that you have that we don't have to reveal to the public. Does that make sense?
I'm comfortable moving forward as Dr. Hub described.
I think go ahead, Kevin. I think you were on the path to.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say if you had handed it off to Jessica, if there's anything that she needs to tell us, but it sounds to me like, yeah, once she explains the plan, I'm prepared to move to approve her recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just give some general information then about the account without any specifics. It was one of the more severely delinquent accounts for a local business, a small business here in Georgetown. We had set them up on a monthly payment plan that was substantial, and I don't think that's confidential. It was about $4,000 a month. So, and they have maintained those payments since November. So they've been able to pay down and make current both of their net profit accounts, because there's 2 accounts at issue. So a business account and a personal account, both of the net profits have been made current. So that was approximately $4,000. And then they've been working on chipping away at the withholding balance that was from prior years. So the withholding balance they had was from 2007 to 2016. And their current withholding is current. So 17, 18, 19, 20, that's all current. So this was an old balance. They've maintained their payments. They've paid down, as I said, $4,000 a month. So November, December, January, February, March. So they've paid 20,000 approximately already on the balance. Last week, I received a call from the business owner asking if he were to make whole all of the taxes due by the end of April, if we would do anything in terms of a waiver of any of the penalties and interest. And so to kind of give you an idea of what that would look like, as of today, taking into account all the payments that he's already made, his original balance was over 48,000. And taking into account all the payments today, his balance stands at around 34,000. 21,000 of that is taxes, and over 11,000 is interest, and about 6,700 is penalties. Now he has paid some of those interest and penalties down, so we're probably more looking at around 9,000 in interest and around 4,000 in penalties that he's requesting that for. He didn't request a total waiver. He asked if there was anything we could do because he wanted to get this paid off by the end of the month. And so I said I would bring it to you. Obviously, it doesn't fit within the category of abatement that we typically do through Scott as the director. So given circumstances, given the taxes that are due, we wanted to bring it to the commission in order to consider that. And if there was a waiver, what it would look like. Would it be a whole waiver? Would it be penalties? Would it just be interest? And just kind of get your guidance on what you wanted us to do with that regard, to get him an answer either way.
And we had,
I'm sorry, Scott or Andrew, what is your all's read on it and your recommendation?
we chatted about this last week, and acknowledged the fact that it's not something we typically do. It's not something that's, it's setting a precedent, and waiving penalties and interest is we discussed that it is something we have the commission has the power to do. So I don't think that's an issue. The issue then becomes precedent setting. What we discussed as an alternative to simply waiving the penalty and interest was deferring the penalties and interest, establishing a time period for which the taxpayer would be required to remain compliant. So we'll say, we'll defer your penalties and interest for a period of 2 years. And I'm just making up that number because I don't know that we landed on one.
I will say, Andrew, not to interrupt you, but I did look at the prior agreements that were entered into by the county attorney when Jeff was here, and they range depending on the delinquency. So some of them are 12 months, if they went up to 36 months, it kind of depended on the history of the account, it seemed
Sure.
like.
So we would say, we will defer your penalties and interest for a period of 2 years. And if you remain compliant for that 2 years, at the end of 2 years, then we will consider those penalties and interest to have been satisfied, and then they're waived. So we're not immediately waiving it. We're creating an incentive for them to remain compliant. But in the event that they are not compliant, then those penalties and interest haven't been waived at that point. We essentially claw those back. And Scott, you tell me if I've got this wrong, but I think we landed on that as a prudent compromise.
Absolutely. I think that's very fair. I think that we talked about a lot of different things. First of all, this taxpayer has been very compliant since we started working with them, which is not always the case, obviously. So if anybody's willing to work with us, I think we should be willing to work with them, especially consider the current crisis we find ourselves in. And we also talked about the fact that there is language, I don't know if it's in our ordinance or KRS, we talked about this, where the commissioners certainly have the discretion. The language that's often used, we used it a lot in Louisville, was in consideration of the hazards and cost of litigation. Mm-hmm. So I think that is kind of what we're hanging our hat on to a certain extent, but I really like Andrew's idea of the deferring it, because, oftentimes, and we saw this a lot with the past history here in the Revenue Commission, even long before I got here, where people would enter into these plans They would stay compliant for a month or two. In some cases, they would become immediately non-compliant as soon as they got whatever waiver that they wanted. And then they would, they wouldn't stay current. They wouldn't remain current. They still became a thorn in our side, as it were, in terms of expending resources in terms of collection again after we had kind of extended the olive branch to them. So I fully support this. I think it's a great path to go towards, and it certainly does not conflict with our existing penalty and interest abatements, which I normally handle through regular commission policy. But I think this is an extraordinary circumstance. And anytime, of course, the IRS has something called offer and compromise. I think Department of Revenue has something similar. So it's not unprecedented in terms of tax collection, but I'm not sure that this is certainly not something we've entered into since I've been here. And that's why we wanted to have the conversation with Jessica and I and Andrew, but I fully support it.
So when you guys talk about compliance, does that mean compliance with withholding and compliance with net profits for the period of time that so no payments of penalty and interest? It's just compliance of what they're supposed to do.
Yes, so well, I would imagine the agreement, now Andrew, speak if I'm saying anything incorrectly, but if he paid the full tax balance within 30 days, which he said by the end of this month, so it would be sooner than that. And then he maintained current accounts for both of his accounts, both net profit and withholding, for 12 to 36 months. At the end of that time, that would be considered satisfied and his account would be current. So really, I mean, he is current in the current taxable year. So the past 3 taxable years, he's current. It's getting caught up from 2010 that has been, it seems, the big issue for this specific taxpayer. And I think it's a sign of goodwill because, of course, this taxpayer is in an industry that's been very hit because of everything that's going on. And I think he may have been a benefactor of some of the federal government money going to small businesses, and he wants to use that so that they are current. And that's kind of the language that I got from him, is that he wanted to just be current, to get current licenses and be able to move forward as they already have in terms of the current taxable stuff.
So considering that within a span of 6 months, it sounds like he's going to be all caught up with principal, so to speak. So my recommendation would be that 12 months after completion of payment, which we believe is going to be May 1st of 20, after 12 months of deferment, then I think, because at that point it would be 18 months. So we'd be right in the middle of what had been practiced before between 12 and 36. So that's my recommendation, that a type of agreement be drafted with 12 months of deferment after making.
So after all the principal taxes are satisfied, I'll get a period of 30 days, I think is fair given what he said. He will maintain current compliance on both of his accounts, on both sides of the account. And after 12 months, that will have been satisfied, and that will no longer, we can take that off of his account.
That would be my motion.
Okay.
I will second that motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. I think that's a great outcome. Just devil's advocate, Scott, one question. When you're working with the bank and personally, or your business, and particularly on these PPP loans, which is about all the banks are doing right now, wouldn't our agreement stay on his balance sheet as a contingent liability?
Yes, because he until the deferment period ends, he still owes it.
Right. So it's not an actual liability, but it's a contingent liability.
Yes.
The only thing I would say is if he came back to us and said that being a contingent liability on his financial statement was a deal breaker for a PPP loan or something, that we might reconsider. But absent something that severe, I think Kevin's got a good motion.
I agree.
And if Jessica or Andrew thought that it was prudent to put another sentence in there, Mayor, because you've got the banking experience, if that was needed, I'm certainly amenable to amending my recommendation. Or we can come back when the taxpayer says, hey, wait a minute, can we readjust this because I'm unable to get a PP loan?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jessica.
I was just going to say, I can send some language over to Andrew and just something generally about if it should become an obstacle for business purposes or funding purposes. And that should be inclusive of that. I'm sure I can find some kind of language to sample that from.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to encourage the property owner to not do the right thing. But Scott, that might give you the latitude.
I appreciate that. That's a good point to bring up, and it's something we probably need to bake into the cake here.
Okay, good.
And I would add that my hope is we know that
Great.
sadly, this won't be the last time we deal with something like this, and that we would try to be consistent going forward with our approach. And if people want to come to the table and good and work with the commission, then we should try to exercise that consistency and going forward. And I'll defer to
And
you.
that was my thought when Andrew and I initially talked about it. We talked about whether or not it was creating a precedent, and I said, well, if any account that was this delinquent for that long of a period came forward and said, hey, we want to pay all the taxes, I think we would entertain it, always. So to me, it's not a new precedent. It's something that nobody has done, of course, but I mean, this is really old tax debt. So, I mean, some of it might not even be collectible if we were to litigate. So I feel like it's a great solution to get him current and then to make that whole in terms of what he withheld and didn't remit. So, I would love to see a solution like this for other accounts that are having trouble with past.
And what Scott mentioned was in lieu of litigation and the cost of that, this makes sense.
That's true. And I also just want to add, of course, everything Jessica said, I agree with. We had extensive discussions with Andrew about this. And one of the things that always comes up when we talk about these kinds of things is we look at it through the prism is we have to be able to treat everybody the same. So like Jessica said, if another taxpayer came to us with a similar situation, would we entertain it? I think we'd be foolish not to.
This isn't the last. This isn't the last time we're going to get a request like this with the current situation. So
that's why we
I
wanted to
think
be.
Jessica makes a great point that the issues that we're going to see, I think, from small businesses in the next 6 months are really totally different from this. This was a massive issue over multiple years. I do agree that we are probably going to need to be thinking about, and I'll defer to our three experts, to come up with language proactively, because we can only imagine that there's going to be some requests of deferments and discounts and whatever happens.
right.
Very true.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kevin. I think we do need to anticipate that because those are going to become our reality very soon.
Yeah. And we're also, I will say, another reason it's going to become a reality is because I'm now able to work some really old accounts. And so I've been engaging in that process. So I think it will continue to happen because some of the accounts have the resources, they just haven't done it. So I think it's good that we're having this conversation now and can get a template going of what everyone agrees to and start using that should they come forward and want to make some of these old delinquencies current.
Sounds good. We have a motion and a second and plenty of discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Got pulling up our agenda here. What else do we have on the agenda?
Andrew wanted to insert a general discussion. Andrew, how do you want to handle number 5 there?
Yeah, I think that because we're in a special called meeting here, we're supposed to be limited. But we put that in there just in case a commission member had a question about any of the general info that Scott emailed you. I think we intended to keep this meeting as short as possible. So instead of Scott doing his usual walkthrough of his updates, we emailed it to you in advance so that in case you had any questions about particular items, this would be your opportunity to ask that of Scott and Jessica.
No questions.
No question.
I thought it was very thorough, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So, Scott, we're all wrestling with budget preparation right now. I think the judge may be well, Kevin, yours was probably put to bed a long time ago. But between local government, county is gets that done a little faster than the city does. But boy, these revenue estimates are tough, Scott.
They are. They are. And it's unfortunate because I did an analysis that I was going to present if we were going to have a regular meeting, that the first 3 quarters across the board were very good for all jurisdictions. We were on track to have a very good fiscal year in terms of increases, especially on the payroll side. But of course, the fourth quarters makes it all irrelevant.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that it makes it irrelevant. I mean, if we had 3 really good quarters, that should help offset the fourth bad quarter at least. I probably we could all use that information soon. I speak as an administrator, not as the council here.
Anything you could share that I would
Anything.
love to see.
Yeah.
Well, I can certainly email all of you the analysis I did. I even did a look at where we are in the refunds for the first 3 quarters. And it was looking really strong. It was looking like a really strong year for collections in the aggregate. So I guess maybe irrelevant was a poor choice. What I meant to say is obviously this fiscal year is not going to wind up that way. Clearly, especially on net profits, our biggest month is the month of April. And since that filing deadline is now moved 3 months out, that normal boost in net profits that we would see from the 2019 tax year is not going to be realized until the next fiscal year. So, that's the dilemma everyone's dealing with at the federal, state, and local level.
Yeah, so not only is it a depressed business climate, but the timing is now going to catch us in a different fiscal year.
Yes. And as we all know, most of the revenue, the vast majority of it comes from the payroll. And until we see those May payroll numbers start rolling in about this time next month, that's really going to tell the tale. That and the months after that, because what we got this month was, while it was down, it was
It's pretty normal.
pretty good. I mean, not that for the first, from April 1st to April 17th, the collections were not off as much as I thought they would be, but that's because you were looking at primarily March payroll in there. So
Middle of the month, we'll see what the damage from April looks like.
yeah, the numbers for the middle of May distributions that we'll send to the jurisdictions, that will really tell the tale.
Yeah. Have you take kind of a national perspective sometimes, Scott? Have you thought about the shape of the recovery? This is not going to be a V-shaped recovery. We've pretty much established that, but have your peers taken a look at the next fiscal year?
No, everyone's kind of scrambling. We're really very much in uncharted waters here. Everybody's taking their best guess at it. I will say the KLC numbers, which I think for cities they projected to average somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% decrease. I can tell you what the decrease we have seen in April for the distribution that you all just got, that we just sent out to everybody yesterday. It was down, but it was 19%. So it's even below the KLC, which I know is just cities, but it's below their 25% across the board projection, which to me was a little bit encouraging, at least for the way we're looking for the month of April. And we've had, since I did the cutoff on April 17th, we've had a couple of other good days as well. So hopefully April will wind up being better than I had hoped. I was anticipating 25% or even worse, but we don't, the news reports in terms of our largest employer, I've been a little confused by them. I thought they were getting paid for a part of this period and then using PTO if they had it. So there's just a lot of unknowns. And frankly, it's still a lot of job shedding yet to come is what I'm hearing people are concerned about, is that, there may be continued furloughs and layoffs depending on how long this goes on. But then you also hear in certain states, they're starting to reopen slowly some aspects of it, and some of them are our neighboring states. So, it's anybody's best guess right now. The only thing everybody can agree on is it's not going to be good.
Okay, thank you. Judge, anything you've got for the good of the order today?
Nope. The sun's out and we're marching forward. We are we're going to have our first reading of our budget on Thursday. We had a workshop yesterday and discussion, and you know, as much information that Scott and Jessica and the team can share with us that comes in a timely fashion. It's a picture of, you know, where we're looking, but I know that you don't have a crystal ball about where we're going after July 1, and anything you can share would be appreciated, and I know you will. So appreciate the job you do.
We will. And something Jessica and I talked about this morning too is actually in the next fiscal year, we'll have 2 April 15th. We'll have July 15th and April 15th. So that will probably skew the numbers depending on if anyone has a net profit to report for 2020. We will have 2 filing deadlines in the same fiscal year, which has never happened before.
But some of the 2019 taxes, of course, will be, maybe that will offset. I mean,
We hope. We hope.
2019 is still owed, even if we do a payment plan or something like that with some of the bigger accounts. So my hope would be that that would help a little bit with the hit from 2020, that the taxes.
And I will say too, I know you all get a lot of emails, but we do continue to send out the daily deposit email to all of you. So you kind of have a sense daily of what the cash flow is looking like as it's coming in. But I'll certainly, whatever I've got now, the limited analysis I've done, some of the data from KLC, and maybe I'll see if I can find some pertinent national data, and I'll certainly share that with all of you via email within the next week or so.
Thank you. That'd be helpful. Dr. Hub, anything?
Well, not necessarily for the Revenue Commission, but for you and the judge, if I may call each of you and do a merged cell phone call that'll take less than 5 minutes when we adjourn. Can I do that to talk about graduation ideas?
Be glad to.
Thank you. I'll call each of you separately and we'll do a merge call on the phone.
All right.
Absolutely.
Jessica, thank you, ma'am. Andrew, anything else?
I think we've reached the end of our agenda.
All right.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Albert. Motion's been made,
I'll second that.
seconded, and it's unanimous. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone. Thank you.